So here we go back now from the visit of one of the most famous Paleolithic sites in the world, which is the Abri de la Madeleine. It is a site that is very famous for the research history, obviously, but also for many finds. And we study hundreds of finds from this site here in the Museum of Les Eyzies de Taillac.
Welcome to Stone Age Science. We are scientists investigating information encoding from the earliest signs in the Paleolithic to the modern-day information age. We take you with us on our journey to museums and universities, examining the mobile artifacts in their originals to understand the signs of the Stone Age. We are in Les Eyzies de Taillac, and in part 1 of this video we studied the deer teeth of the so-called Saint-Germain-la-Rivière burial. We also saw some sites like La Micoque, Le Moustier, Castelmerle with Abri Blanchard and Abri Castanet, as well as La Ferracie and Grotte du Sorcier. However, both the Musée National de Préhistoire as well as the region had more in store for us. One of the grand challenges at the museum in Les Eyzies was to even get an overview of all of the artifacts which are there in the showcases to study. And this is where Catherine Cretin, the collection manager, was extremely helpful to us. She went into the collection with us and removed the artifacts for Eva to study one by one. For our database, we exclude artifacts which are deliberately modified, but where the modification is solely for utilitarian purposes. So, for example, a hole that is used to put a thread through. What we also typically exclude are purely figurative mobile artifacts. These are tricky because you could argue that even in this iconic case of figurative artifacts, there might be more abstract information transmitted. But for now, these are excluded from our database.
Tu as alors tu vois, ça c'est les poissons, les pisciformes.
Ah oui,
tu vois,
d'accord.
celui-là et celui-là.
Oui.
Ça fait partie des signes en relief pisciformes.
Such relief signs are typically included in our database because it is impossible to say whether they are just decoration or if they carry some more meaning. And in any case, they are abstract, deliberate markings, so falling under our definition of what we want to include in the database.
Ça c'est un rancourt aussi, donc tu as un renne. Et puis il y a un petit bout qui recolle tout en bas à droite et qui est un poisson.
Iconic depictions will be included if we have the impression that these are to some extent abstracted, and in particular if the iconic depictions are combined with geometric marks. And finally, the main category of artifacts we include in the database are those which are adorned with whole sequences of signs, sometimes even selectively applied to parts of artifacts, and sometimes we even have combinations of different sign types in a sequence. Well, some of the artifacts are not easily removed from the showcases. Apart from the artifacts which are in the actual exhibition in the showcases, there are also hundreds and hundreds of artifacts in the depot. Here, Catherine just counts the drawers in which you have artifacts from Abri de la Madeleine.
14, 15, 15, 30.
So it is a formidable task to locate the actual artifacts in the museum, which we have already put into our database based on the literature.
And here you have the 3 pieces, okay? So why not 12? So
When the museum closed in the afternoon, we had time to visit sites. We started with Laugerie-Basse. It's a site renowned around the world. It was discovered back in 1864 by Edouard Lartet and Christy, and since then, in several excavations, more than 500 artifacts have been found that are in the category of art, so statuettes, figurines, different kinds of tools with adornments, and these are spread to museums and collections around the world. The site is dated mainly to the time frame around 18,000 years ago to 14,000 years ago, so right into the so-called Magdalenian period, from the earliest Magdalenian to the Magdalénien supérieur. At Laugerie-Basse you can even walk through the stratigraphy through a tunnel and maybe even discover new artifacts.
So now we are heading to Laugerie-Haute, where we will meet Victor, who is waiting there for us, and he will show us around.
Laugerie-Haute, so the high Laugerie, is up the river in comparison to Laugerie-Basse, which is down the river. Here we were guided by Victor Chante, who works for the Centre des Monuments, and he's in fact a local of the area. He grew up around Les Eyzies. Laugerie-Haute has a long and complex research history, starting with the discovery again by Edouard Lartet and Christy in 1863, so just 1 year before Laugerie-Basse. And since then, over the course of the 20th century, there were different excavations by, for instance, Louis Capitan, Henri Breuil, also Otto Hauser, and then later on Denis Perroni and François Borde. And Denis Perroni was the first one to establish a stratigraphy, which is still indicated by the historical plates. When you look closely, you can find artifacts in the stratigraphy. Here Victor indicates a bois du renne for us, so an antler piece. Maybe you can see it if you look closely now.
C'est énorme.
Mais un morceau d'os. Voilà.
C'est énorme.
Yeah.
C'est au milieu du solitaire.
Ouais. Et probablement un mammouth qui a peut-être, enfin des morceaux qui ont été déplacés par des charognards peut-être. Et là, on retrouve hein, cette ligne-là.
Ah, mais ça, c'est incroyable.
Là, une dent de cheval. Et en fait, si on éclaire là, on est sur les poubelles.
Mhm.
Il y a que des os. Des os, des os, des os, des os. Une montagne d'os.
Yeah. The lowest level in this stratigraphy was called Périgordien, according to the area of the Périgord. Nowadays, this is typically associated with the Gravettian period, and if you look closely, you can see that the origination was originally put on top of this. However, this was reanalyzed, and nowadays, this origination layer is rather a different type of layer coming after the Gravettian. In any case, for Denis Perroni, also these cultural complexes were not associated with certain time frames, but with people moving around in the area. As we were talking to Victor, the light slowly faded away. However, the day wasn't over for us. We went on to yet another site, Abri du Poisson.
Le vallon est très protégé, sauf là où on va.
So we hiked into the Gorge d'Enfer, literally Hell's Throat, where you have several sites. For instance, Abri Lartet. This was named after Edouard Lartet and Henry Christy, who discovered it in the late 19th century again. And here a bone plate was found in this particular abri with rows of dots and notches, sometimes interpreted as a moon calendar. Abri du Poisson is right next to it, and as Victor explained to us, the famous salmon relief in this abri was almost removed and sold to the museum in Berlin. This was prevented in the last minute by the local authorities.
C'est le ministre qui écrit au préfet et qui lui dit de faire intervenir la gendarmerie, de fermer l'abri. Mais il y a autre chose. Si le poisson est déjà enlevé, faire rechercher le véhicule, l'arrêter et le séquestrer.
Très bien.
Ce qui est quand même vachement intéressant, c'est qu'il a des caractéristiques anatomiques vachement réalistes, très réalistes. C'est pas fréquent, parce qu'ils peuvent faire des choses très stylisées quand même. Alors là, on a la tête ici. Hein. Oui. Là, vous avez un petit bec.
Ouais, j'ai le.
Vous l'avez. Et ça, c'est caractéristique du moment où les saumons sont dits bécards, c'est-à-dire le moment où ils sont adultes et où ils remontent pour se reproduire. Là, vous avez aussi la bouche. Donc, on a vraiment un critère anatomique très fin, quoi. Là, une truite aurait eu la bouche qui remonte jusqu'ici. Et là, ils l'ont arrêté là. Là, on a l'ouïe, l'œil, le ventre. Là, on a ce qu'on appelle la nageoire anale. Juste ici, hein, c'est une nageoire. Là, c'est la nageoire caudale. Ça, c'est la nageoire adipeuse. Ici. Pareil, détail anatomique. Hein. Et ce qui est très bizarre, c'est qu'ils n'ont pas fait la nageoire dorsale. Parce que là, vous avez la ligne de dos qui a été bien décaissée, hein, bien sculptée. Et vous avez ça, qui est trop loin pour être une nageoire. Enfin, c'est très bizarre. Probablement que c'est un signe abstrait. Vous avez cette ligne. 3, 4, 6, 7. Voilà. Bon, aujourd'hui, l'interprétation la plus générale, c'est que c'est des traits parallèles, hein, probablement associés au saumon.
Oui.
Probablement, mais
Yeah.
enfin, on n'y était pas non plus. Hein, donc,
The next morning, we were excited to get up because we had the unique opportunity to visit Abri de la Madeleine. We were accompanied by Laure Fontana and Christophe Petit. Laure is a zooarchaeologist who has worked on the finds from Abri de la Madeleine for more than a decade, and she was as kind as to take us along.
I'm almost a little bit nervous now. It's crazy. And I'm not even an archaeologist, I'm just a linguist.
La Madeleine is the site that gave the name to the so-called Magdalenian period, so the latest period of the Upper Paleolithic, which then dovetails into the Mesolithic. The Magdalenian is famous for its richness of cultural artifacts, which really stand out from anything that has come before in the Gravettian and in the Aurignacian period. The Abri is located right next to the Vézère River, at the foot of a sharp rock cliff. In fact, Laure told us that even in historical times, sometimes deer would fall off the cliffs. So you can imagine how for the people of the Upper Paleolithic, this was like food raining from the heavens. The first archaeological sections were established by, guess who, Lartet and Christy in the late 19th century. Denis Perroni then took up this work in 1910, and Christophe Petit here indicates for us where the original ground floor was. Everything from there downwards was then excavated by Lartet and Christy and Denis Perroni. In 1926, Perroni made an exceptional find, the elaborate burial of a 2 to 4 year old child.
The child.
Yeah.
Okay. Child. Well, how he discovered the child, how when he began to excavate, he said there was not a kind of hole, but the sediment were very red. And immediately, that's what he wrote. I don't know if it's true, but he said, it's ochre, I'm sure. And it's not clear, really, the position where the shells were exactly. Right. Because he said there were many shells around his head, okay, and here and here and here, and he make a kind of drawing, but it's not very clear, and we never know. And they found after many shells, okay, around and other a pierced tooth.
So Laure is currently piecing together all of the different parts of information from excavation reports, which is not always an easy task.
This stratigraphy here, 2 meters high, it comes from here and here. So little part here, 2, okay? The little stones you can see here everywhere, okay? And then, here it's not clear, I said 1920 because... Pas volé.
Das musst du filmen hier, aber von der Seite.
Autorisation de visiter les peintures du diverticule final de la grotte de Fond de Gaume accordée à Michel Egloff, signé par Elie Perroni.
Michel Egloff's.
Michel Egloff,
in Switzerland.
In,
This professor in Switzerland. You know.